after I've written this sermon, I want to go back and change the title, and today is no exception. If I were to go back and change the title of this sermon, it would be The Artist is Present. The artist is present. Perhaps you've noticed our resident artist today. Actually, we have so many artists in residence today, but particularly the work of Anthony McCarr. Reverend Anthony McCarr is creating something, and we are able to witness his moment of creation, which is quite a gift. So that's what's going on over here. All shall be revealed in the fullness of time. Raise your hand if you are an artist. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to take you through two stories of creation. This will be for everyone in the room, not just those who raised their hands. And together we will discover the conditions that we need to reach that holy, that egoless ecstasy of creating something where there was nothing. So our first story takes us to the Atlanta Press Club. So I had the opportunity to attend the Atlanta Press Club's annual induction into their Hall of Fame at one of those Midtown hotels. And tucked in amongst the more visible faces in news television was one inductee who had been invisible to me prior to this night. At least I had never seen him in person, and it was the political cartoonist Mike Lukovic. Perhaps you know his work and enjoy it. So he's a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner. He has worked for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for almost 40 years, sending one political cartoon into his editor each day and two on Fridays. They played a montage of his work of the last 40 years, and I found myself shocked at how intimate his cartoons are, how crass for a Southern daily, how edgy and brutally honest. And this one, my favorite of his work in recent days, is no exception. After the montage of his work and the editor-in-chief's sweet and heartfelt introduction, a formally dressed, middle-aged white man who I would describe as spry approached the stage and immediately burst into tears, sobbing. Could not speak for quite a while. When he finally looked up from the podium at this room filled with colleagues and strangers, he radiated that effusive combination of joy and shock that comes from someone who found their true vocation and received the gratifying recognition that even though he thought he was alone, he is understood. But it was immediately clear that he needed no award to understand the gift bestowed onto him. When he finally spoke, he said, "I can't believe they let me do this." And he started to talk about his work. He told us about his profoundly messy desk with high to the ceiling with piles, and how his office is a complete pigsty, how he goes to work at 9:30 a.m. each morning and basically does nothing until 3 p.m. every day, just procrastinates until 3 p.m. just in time for a 6 p.m. deadline for his cartoon. So about 3:30, his palms start to sweat, and then he'll finally sit down at 4. Describing his day, he broke down in tears again, simply awash in gratitude and being understood. This crowd, all dressed in business attire, they responded awkwardly to the public display of emotion. It was one of those public moments when people don't quite understand what's going on. I experience those as a divine moment. Something else is coming in. He looked up once again, and he started to talk to us about how the AJC was a pretty funky office, actually, with a disco ball. And he wanted us to know how funky it felt to be part of this crew of writers. He gestured to the DJ, who started to play Bruno Mars' 24 Karat Magic. Hey. It was echoing throughout the hotel. Thank you, DJ. It was echoing throughout the hotel conference room. And then this 58-year-old cartoonist, Mike Lukovic, walked over to a 1980s era overhead projector he had on stage, and he began to draw. for us. And as he drew, he allowed the music to enter into his spirit. And then he began to dance while he drew. His dance was indeed funky and jerky and completely and wholly unrestrained. This was a joyful, weird dance. His performance was full of risk, humility, and joy. Now I'm going to say those three things again because they're important. Risk, humility, joy. He was trying to show us something mysterious and hidden. He was inviting us in to experience his moment of creation. Watching Lukovic create his cartoon on stage, I was struck by the duality of complete focus and the total lack of effort at the very same time. I mean, the lines on the screen just flowed out of his hands, forming something we could not quite yet see. The dance flowed out of his body in the same way. I mean, it was unlike anything I had seen. Meanwhile, the image on the screen became funnier and kind of dirty too and inappropriate. And there he was on stage in front of at least hundreds, uncensored. Uncensored. So now I want to take you to another moment of creation that I was honored to witness in my life. Earlier this morning on the screen, we saw a brief video of a public art piece called the Gramsci Monument. This was a temporary monument to an early 20th century Italian philosopher, a Marxist philosopher named Antonio Gramsci, who spent the end of his life in an Italian prison. Has anyone ever heard of Gramsci, this communist Marxist philosopher? Okay, well, I love Gramsci, and I highly recommend you check him out. The Swiss artist Thomas Hirschhorn, contemporary artist, designed this monument to be built in the quad in the middle of the Forest Houses, a high-rise public housing community deep in the Bronx in New York City. For 2.5 months, one summer in 2013, a museum paid for residents of Forest Houses to work alongside the artist to build, curate, and staff the monument, which was built with low-quality ramshackle materials. I spent one balmy July day at the Gramsci Monument, and I never wanted to leave. I mean, this project exemplified the glorious, innovative chaos of community. Everyone who lived in the Forest Houses felt ownership. I mean, they were the owners. The monument belonged to them. And each day, someone was cooking over here, there was a little kitchen, or painting over here, or giving a philosophy lecture in the little atrium over here, or reading, or creating a sculpture. All ages, there were children here every single day, creating art. According to one critic, Whitney Kimball, the writings of communist philosopher Gramsci seem to resonate with every part of the monument and how it was made, particularly Gramsci's concept that all people are intellectuals, though society does not allow for all people to assume intellectual roles, that pessimism can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that the intellectual must take active participation in practical life as a constructor, a builder, an organizer, and a permanent persuader, not just a simple orator. According to the artist Thomas Hirschhorn, the Gramsci Monument is a new kind of monument. It is time-limited. It is not a monument which understands eternity as a question of time. It is a monument which understands eternity as here and now. At the Gramsci Monument, every minute of every summer day was a moment of creation. I sat in a plastic chair through a philosophy lecture I did not understand with Forest House residents who had also sat through a philosophy lecture each day at 2 p.m., who tried to help me make some sense of what I had just heard. And by this point, late in July, they were practiced at reading and learning philosophy. I spoke to a man, actually the man in the video, who was working on some Marxist graffiti. I got to meet him working on some graffiti on one wall. He said he had never done any kind of art until this summer, though he was, by this point, retired. Then he picked up the paint can at the artist's suggestion, and it all just came out of him, he said. Another elderly man working as curator of the Gramsci altar, displaying some of the combs and personal items from the philosopher's time in prison, said he didn't even know why he was working at the monument every day. "It just feels good to me," he said. "I like to see the kids learn about a different way of thinking. I like to watch the teenagers work on the daily newspaper and the radio station in the newsroom. All of creation all around me." As a viewer, the monument was completely immersive. Time seemed to stretch out. I mean, we completely lost track of it until it started getting dark. We were deep inside this magical day of communal innovation. Where there had been nothing, there was now an incredible network of creatives and intellectuals, formerly people, now artists. Art does not have to be the pursuit of an individual. Artist and writer Julia Cameron tells us that because artists work from their inner core, many of us have experiences of inspiration, which I would define as conscious contact with the divine. I believe we achieve the same transcendent state making art that meditators achieve when they meditate. Time and space drop away. We are utterly absorbed by what we are making. Painter Robert Motherwell talks about the brush taking the next stroke. When we are acting on inspiration, we lose our sense of ourselves as individuals. The art moves through us as our ego stands aside. For a writer, the word seems to find the next word. For an actor, the gesture seems to find the next gesture. This is why writers learn to drop down the well and let go. This is why actors learn to be in the moment. What is being in the moment but being in touch with God, who might be called the great now? Try letting a creative force work through you and see if you don't work more freely than when you consider yourself to be the author of your art. It's just an idea. Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, the Harvard neuropsychiatrist who suffered a mid-career stroke, developed profound insight into our brains and their potential for connectedness and creativity. Post-stroke, she is now still a brain researcher, writer, and speaker, and she is a stained glass artist. She says, "Our right hemisphere is all about the present moment. It's all about right here, right now. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in pictures and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems. And it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like." What was that word, that term Elise had earlier in the service about the collage of the moment or something like that? Yeah, multilingual musical collage. It's about what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like and sounds like. We are energy beings, connected to one another through the consciousness of our right hemispheres, as one human family, she says. We are all siblings on this planet, here to make the world a better place. And in this moment, we are perfect. We are whole. We are beautiful. And then in comes the left hemisphere, reminding us of all we haven't done yet in our to-do lists and all the things we have to take care of. Taylor urges us to choose to cultivate, make a choice to cultivate a relationship with our right brains. In fact, make a choice to try leading with your right brain. While this is often viewed as a solo project, with the famous image of the artist alone in her or his studio for hours on end, it may be more about our connectedness after all. The creativity is perhaps how we can inspire each other, how to make artists out of each other, building a world we dream about. So here's where I'm coming around. We need to create something that never existed before, individually and collectively, too. But what conditions will bring us to this divine, eternal experience that I call holy synchronicity? First, from political cartoonist Mike Lukovic, we learned that you must be uncensored. Freedom of thought is paramount to accessing the divine moment of creation. From Lukovic, we also understand that urgency is a condition of holy inspiration. There is an edge of panic at the corner of creation. If anyone who has struggled with procrastination can understand, sometimes you just need that last minute to create the panic. Even God only had 6 days. God had a deadline. From Swiss artist Thomas Hirschhorn, we learn that we must have access to art, to new thought, to new ideas. We must bring also our positive, appreciative sides of ourselves to the work and exercise those demons of skepticism and pessimism. The call to create is more powerful than mere enjoyment. From Julia Cameron, we learn that discipline, repetition, and time are necessary to access holy synchronicity. Without discipline, we cannot stretch out and become fully absorbed in the task. So Julia Cameron has all these exercises to do every day, morning pages, artist dates, all these things to create time and space to be fully absorbed. And from Dr. Jill Taylor, we hear the call to lead with our right brains throughout our lives, to feel and sense the thrilling collage of the present moment, connecting to the energy that is all around us. For many of us, the dark of winter is a deeply creative time. We had someone in the first service who was knitting throughout the whole worship. We stay indoors more. We venture inward. We attune ourselves to the creativity of the holiday season. The church has always been a creative expression of human vision. Maybe you can't spare the time. It seems impossible to spare the time or muster the energy to make art. I mean, is anyone else daunted by this? What, now I have to make art too? Well, what if making art is not separate from life, but a part of it? Do you make dinner? Do you make jokes? When was the last time you lost yourself or lost part of a day? And I don't mean scrolling through, social media. That's not that kind of losing yourself. It's the connectedness. When you know you've come through the feeling of letting go and allowing some other force to guide your hand towards creation. And that is my Advent wish for you. That you, like the cartoonist, like the artist, can find spaces and people who will encourage you to discover your urgent vision, to embrace joy, creative discipline, intellectual freedom, to surrender to the divinity of creation. Raise your hand if you're an artist. All the hands should be raised if I've done my job. Amen. Blessed be.